Hi everybody, Kat here for Lifted Up Today, and we are trying to catch up on our study at night in my office with bad lighting, and I'm really excited to do it anyway. So thanks for tuning in. Matthew is very juicy. I want to get started on it as soon as possible. We may go into two parts. So first question is in verses 1 and 2, Herod speculates about Jesus' identity. What led him to believe that Jesus is John the Baptist? And I want to give you a little bit of a background on Herod. It's really interesting. He comes from a very liberal, I want to say colorful family. He is this Herod Antipas is the one that we're talking about in chapter 14, and he's a different Herod than is mentioned in chapter 2. In chapter 2, that Herod that killed all of the Israelite children, the little boys that were of a certain age, he was trying to kill the infant Jesus at the time, and so he just figured he would, if he killed all the boys, then maybe he'll get Jesus too, because he was afraid Jesus, since there was talk of him being the king of the Jews, that Herod was afraid that he would lose his throne, which is just ridiculous, that Jesus would even want it. But anyway, that's not the Herod that we're talking about. That was Herod the Great. And Herod the Great, he ended up dying, actually, a very gruesome death. And from the historical records, it sounds like he was diagnosed with kidney disease and also gangrene of the private parts. So I'm sure it was very painful. But anyway, Herod the Great, while he was alive, he had children, about 7 different sons from 5 different women. Herod Antipas was from one of those women, and he descended from, her name was Malthus. She was a Samaritan. He also had a brother, Archelaus. I'm murdering his name. But he had a bunch of half-brothers. Okay, so one of his half-brothers was Herod Philip the First. Now, Herod, the word itself, the name itself, it actually means to tremble or to fear, which is very interesting, because when you read a little bit more about this family, you see that there was a lot of insecurity and a lot of wanting to hold on to their, what they had here on earth, what their material things, their position and everything like that. And it just seemed like they were very insecure and very, Herod Antipas in particular was very influenced to make his decisions based on what people thought of him and how, the crowd reacted and things like that. So he was very easy to control, it seemed like. But anyway, how did King Herod Antipas come to marry Herodias? Now, if we look in chapter 14, we'll see that, John the Baptist would constantly call Herod on the fact that Herod Antipas on the fact that he was committing adultery. He was married to his brother's wife, he said, and Herodias, who married Herod Antipas, hated that. She hated to hear that, and Herod didn't like it either. He really hated that. He wanted to get rid of John, but he didn't, because there was a big following that John the Baptist had, and they believed he was a prophet, so they didn't want him touched. And Herod Antipas feared the crowd, so he would leave John alone. He would leave John the Baptist alone. Now, Herodias was actually married to, as I think I mentioned, she was married to Herod Philip I, who was a half-brother of Herod Antipas. At the time that she met Herod Antipas, she was residing in Rome in the palace with her husband, and and Herod Antipas had visited Rome at the time, and somehow she, I guess, wanted, she was a little adventurous. Maybe she just wanted to get out of the palace for a while and do something else. Maybe she was she appreciated the attention she was getting from Herod Antipas or something. Maybe it fed her ego. I don't know. At this time, she had already had a daughter with Herod Philip the first, and their daughter's name was Salome. And you may remember this Salome from the story here, that from the biblical account, that Herod, after he married, she left her husband Philip and she went to go marry King Herod. And Herod at the time was married to a daughter of a king of Petra. And of course, he just divorced her to get her out of the way so he could marry Herodias, who he wanted at the time. And so Salome came along with them. And there was a party, so there was a big party here that Herod Antipas threw, and everybody was, no doubt they were all drunk and rowdy. And at this time, he had already thrown in John the Baptist into I want to say jail, but in their palace they probably had something that was more like a two different areas that were like a long well that would have gone underneath the ground, and that's where John would have been, was in this big pit, so to speak. Very cold, probably very wet, very dark, and wasn't treated well at all. And so, it's just, he didn't want to kill him though, because he feared the crowd that was behind John. Okay, so anyway, back to the party. Salome, the daughter of Herodias, would have been probably in her teens, and she was asked to do a dance. She did a dance for the party that was and for Herod Antipas, which probably would have been pretty seductive, knowing the family, knowing the time, knowing the culture. And so it got everybody riled up, got the crowd all riled up, got Herod Antipas all riled up, and he proclaimed in several oaths to her throughout the night that he would give her anything she asked for if she would dance for him. She did, and I guess because it pleased him so much, he said that he would give her whatever her heart's desire was. And now he made these oaths in front of everybody at his party, basically. And so no doubt he had dignitaries, he had people he wanted to impress. And so when it came down to the point where she wanted to present her request, she ran back to her mother to ask her what the request was. And wouldn't you know it, Herodias wanted the head of John the Baptist on a platter. So she asked her to ask for that. And of course, she asked for that in front of everyone. And Herod Antipas, who is very, very controlled by what other people think about him, the Bible says that he is, in chapter 14, says that he was sorry. The king was sorry, probably not genuinely sorry, but I mean, he didn't want to do it. I think it says that he didn't want to do it, but in verse 9, and the king was sorry, nevertheless, because of the oaths and because of those who sat with him, he commanded it to be given to her. So he sent and had John beheaded in prison, and his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. What a horrible thing. I mean, just a terrible thing to do, and to, basically show your daughter that, such a selfish, horrible wish that she had herself. But then the next verse here, then his disciples came and took away the body and buried it and went and told Jesus. And that verse there is kind of beautiful and lovely in the fact that here, this horrible, horrible thing happened to the person that was teaching them, their teacher, so to speak, and they were followers of John. And And so, but what did they do? They took his body, they buried it, and then where did they go for comfort? They went to Jesus for comfort, and comfort he gave them. So anyway, that's just a little background there on what had happened there. Now, to answer the question, Herod speculating about Jesus' identity, what led him to believe that Jesus is John the Baptist, I would have to say, if you've ever heard or read or seen the movie, if there was a movie, The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, this is probably something similar to what was happening to King Herod. Here, he did horrible things to John. I mean, basically, he had a guilty conscience. He threw John in prison. He had him beheaded for his niece, and he feared that the multitude. He feared the multitude, and those, because he feared the multitude is why he did it. The people who sat with him. So, I mean, he knows that he did something that was wrong and that was against what he really wanted to do. As horrible as a person that he was, he didn't really want to do that, but he did, which makes him even worse. But, so I think that maybe when he heard about Jesus, he thought, oh gosh, John was a prophet and he's back again, and I'm in big trouble. And so I would think that maybe he was a little frightened, but anyway, I spent a lot of time on that particular question, and then there's two deep, juicy, really wonderful questions here coming up next. I want to answer, the next question is, how is the feeding of the 5,000 a test for the disciples? And this is really wonderful. And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this right here, and I am going to see you in the next video, part 2. All right, love you guys. Bye.